second annual Roast My Paywall. We did several Roast Paywall webinars last December-ish, and I hadn't done one in a while. We thought it'd be really fun to do another one. So we've got two great guests here today, Steve Young and Phil Carter. Why don't y'all give us each give me a quick introduction of yourself, what you do, what you work on. Steve, why don't you go first?
I hate doing this. I was like, pick on Phil first. Pick on Phil. But I've been doing apps since 2011. Started a podcast back in 2013 that David has been a part of, and then Phil will be a part of pretty soon. And through that, we built out an agency where we try to be the most affordable, most effective app marketing agency out there, and try to really get straight to the nitty gritty and help our clients, big and small, grow downloads and revenues.
Phil?
And yeah, my name's Phil Carter. I actually got to meet Steve a few months ago at RevenueCat's annual summit in San Francisco, along with App Promotion Summit, which was the next day. So Steve, it was nice to meet you there. I do similar work. So I've spent the last decade working in tech as a product leader, primarily consumer businesses, many of them consumer subscription businesses. So Fair, Quizlet, and Ibotta. And then last summer, I started my own growth advising consulting business. I work exclusively with C to Series C consumer subscription businesses, basically companies that have the beginnings of product market fit, but are figuring out how to scale more consistently and sustainably. And so excited to be roasting some paywalls today. And also wanted to give a quick shout out to Steve on the podcast front, because I'm going to be launching my own podcast in January, and he was really helpful in giving me some tips on that. So thanks, Steve.
Oh, thanks, man.
Nice. Most of y'all know me, David Barnard, growth advocate at RevenueCat. I've also, like Steve, been in apps for a long time. Launched my first app in 2008, the month that the App Store launched, and been with RevenueCat 5 years. And most of you know RevenueCat. We're a platform with a mission to help developers make more money. And that was actually one of the things that was so exciting to me when I joined RevenueCat, was the mission. And even the monetization and everything was just so aligned. And as an indie developer who was struggling with making subscription apps work in my app, joining a company whose mission was to help developers make more money, I was like, heck yeah, let's help me make more money. And so I've been here 5 years hosting things like this. And really, I mean, that's the goal here, right? Is that, we're going to roast these paywalls. And actually, I personally screenshotted all these apps late last night. And in doing so, realized this might not be as much of a roast as we initially thought, because these 10 apps that we're going to look at are some of the top grossing apps in the world for a reason. So maybe to be a paywall celebration. But the goal here is for everyone attending, and when this ends up on YouTube, to be able to learn tactics and strategies and ways to think about paywall and influencing users and getting your message across and communicating value, like all those things that are key to converting users. Hope you'll find some things to take away. And then having Steve and Phil, who've been doing this so long and have so many great ideas around that, I think there can be a lot to take away from this. So I'm excited. A few housekeeping notes. We're not going to do a Q&A at the end today, so we'll probably wrap up close to the top of the hour. I will try and watch the chat a little bit, and so you can pop in questions, and I'll try and mix some questions in. Steve's way better at this than me, so you can watch the chat as well, Steve, and pop in with a question here and there. But we won't have a full Q&A. If you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter, we just don't have enough people currently, and I don't have enough eyes and attention span to monitor all those. So we'll be just watching the chat here on Livestorm, where we're hosting. And then lastly, we will post this to YouTube. And then if you signed up, we will send a link to the full recording at the end. So everybody always asks that. So it's good to get that out of the way. So without further ado, let's hit the first paywall of the day, and that is Flow. So for each of these, I'll give like a quick intro, because I just got to experience the whole Flow last night, and then I'll kind of pass it off to Steve and Phil for comment. One of the things I tried to do in prepping for this is capture some of the pages leading to the paywall, because we've been talking more and more about how important it is. There's multi-step paywalls now. And what leads you to the paywall can often really impact like how the paywall works. And so in Flow, you have this really interesting commitment page. So you've gone through this long onboarding, which is really fun for me to do as a man, to do it in the Flow app. So I went through the
They
Flow
support
onboarding.
partners now, David. They support partners, so you're good.
Yes. I didn't want to do the partner flow because I didn't know if I needed a code from my wife or whatever. And so I just did the normal flow. But you get to this last step and it's like, I, David, will use Flow to always know what's coming and manage how I feel. And you have to like hold down on the screen. And it expands and expands and expands. And when it finishes expanding, drops you on the paywall. And that's actually the third screenshot in there is the paywall. And then when you hit the X button and cancel out of the paywall, you actually get multiple offers. So one is a reminder of the free trial. I didn't have enough room to do all the screenshots. And then if you say, no, I don't want the 14-day free trial, then it gives you this one last thing with a little present, and then it drops you into this 77% off forever. So there's a lot going on here. And again, this is something I think, we've been talking more and more about, is that a paywall isn't just a paywall anymore. And having all of this context to understand what's working and what's not, you really need to understand the breadth of this. So I'll pass it to Phil to kick things off. What do you think? What do we critique here? What do we learn from? What's going on?
Sure. Yeah, a lot to break down. And I'll try to leave room for Steve to jump in here too. But I'm glad we started with Flow. This is actually one of the paywalls that I've researched most deeply over the last couple months, and I've recommended some of these tactics to some of my clients. So I guess I'll start with what I like, and then maybe I'll get to some things that could be better. There's a lot to like here. This commitment mechanic on the first screen is something I'm seeing more and more consumer subscription apps doing recently. There's this psychological principle of if you take an extra action to commit to something, it just tends to lead to more follow through. There was a great Lenny's podcast just in the last 48 hours where the group PM from Duolingo, who focuses on streaks, talked about how a copy change they made from just continue to commit to my goal on the streak selection button, where you select how many days you're going to aim to learn for consecutively, had a massive impact on conversion rates. And so there are these like seemingly small and insignificant tactics you can take to just increase a user's commitment level, which tends to boost motivation and lead to longer term engagement and retention. So that's one thing I like. As we get into the actual paywall itself, I think that we're going to be talking about a lot of paywalls, so I won't go through all of the super basic stuff here that you tend to see on every consumer paywall now. The dollar per month, making it easy for the user to compare the relative price of monthly versus annual plans, the badging on the annual plan and defaulting to that because it's better for upfront cash flow. There's a lot of sort of table stakes stuff that Flow does. I think what's unique about this one is, one, they don't actually default you into a trial. So this is subtle, but if you look at that gray bar at the top of the third screen, it defaults to off, which means that if the user just presses continue, they're actually going to pay for their subscription right up front. So that's probably positively impacting conversion rates. It's a little bit misleading, but I'm sure they A/B tested this and it performed well. Then if the user doesn't convert, not all of this is shown here, but I've seen this one enough times, I think I can speak to it. So if you don't convert right away, then there's sort of a reminder where they say, hey, did you know you can opt into your free trial if you convert now? And then if you still don't convert, that's where you get this final screen where you get the 77% off forever. So it's sort of like, no trial at all into trial, but at the same price point into third try, you get the free trial plus you get the 77% discount. So a lot of things to like. As far as what I don't like as much, there are some gray hat tactics going on here. The whole there's a lot of emphasis on free trial throughout the flow, but then it actually defaults to not having a free trial. That's like right on the line of what I would consider okay to do for a user. And then one other thing I'll say is I've seen many people go through this flow now, and it's always 77% off. At least that's the number I've always seen. I've gone through it. I've had colleagues go through it. That seems like something they could personalize, like based off of what they know about the user, based on the onboarding quiz, which precedes the paywall. They could probably be personalizing that discount amount based on various factors.
Yeah. Funny enough, Phil, I love the whole discounting because this is an old stat, but we saw a stat that said only 25% of your first opens come back the second time. And so when I saw this flow from Flow a few years ago, it was in my screenshots too. And I said, look, this is why you should discount. And I use them as an example. And Antonio in the comments, You know, when I shared this on publicly on YouTube, people started doing it, but people started to get rejected by Apple too. So be careful with the immediate exit intent, like discount, because you might get rejected from Apple. But we do see that this does increase conversions by having some discount during that first time user experience. And just like Phil, I'll save some of it because we'll look at other paywalls. But I like that. And the free trial intent to toggle, what I've heard from others, I haven't tested this personally myself, but by having that free trial enabled and you opting in a way, instead of just blanketly giving it, it almost decreases the amount of cancellations. So it increases the trial to paid conversion rates too, from what we heard from other clients.
Yeah, I guess in a way it's like that commitment screen up front. It's like an extra action you're just taking to redeem the reward.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I'm glad you brought up gray patterns, dark patterns, Phil, because it all is a bit of a continuum. And Steve and I mean, our whole podcast that we did on the Sub Club podcast was like gray hat tactics and like where the lines are and where they're not. And it's really tough. And then a lot of it does come down to, you know, your brand, how you want people to perceive your brand. I will say, like, a lot of apps I download these days, and when you layer on tactic after tactic after tactic after tactic, it starts to feel a little scammy when you just like use gray hat after gray hat after gray hat. If you do one thing that is not, and again, I mean, it's like, I've been actually wanting to do a podcast, like the ethics of subscription apps, to like have this like full on debate about like what's good and bad. But wherever you fall kind of on like the morality of these different tactics, you do at least have to understand that they impact your brand perception. And even if they work, they may work for a conversion, but leave a bad taste in somebody's mouth, where they are more likely to cancel, where they're not as like favorable to your brand. And so anytime you're thinking about implementing, you know, what might be an edgy tactic, these are the things you should at least be thinking through. Like, how does a person feel when I do this? And I think this is a good example where you could maybe argue both sides of that toggle, right? It's like having the free trial be there, but you have to tap it. Like, some people, it probably does turn them off because they saw free, and they're like, oh wait, it's not free. But then for some people, it's like, oh yeah, of course I want the free trial, and it's like not even a blip on their screen, but maybe it creates more motivation to complete the trial or whatever. So it's tough. I mean, you know, this is the psychology, user psychology of all this is really fascinating to me as well. One thing I wanted to point out before we go on, I really like the information design of this paywall, in that your eye kind of gets drawn to the right hand side. I'm talking about the third screenshot from the left, where it actually shows all the prices. In the information design of it, is that your eye gets drawn to the $5 a month, and then you go down the line and you see very clearly $667 a month, $14.99 a month. And so even though it's the yearly plan, you look back to the left and you get to the payment confirmation and you see the full price, it just provides such a clear comparison of like what you're paying per month. And so I like that, like, information design. Again, like, you could argue that's like a gray hat tactic, because you're like showing the monthly price versus like they're actually going to get billed annually. But I think it's a really good way to kind of highlight what a discount the annual plan is. So I that's one I think is just a really smart way to do it.
David, that's a great point, because we actually saw an increase. What I've been telling people is compare the plans, right? Like, because we only see monthly and yearly, but do the math for the end user. And we have seen, I forget the percentage it was, but it's like a 31% increase versus showing these prices in the same monthly amount, and versus not showing them and just showing them as a yearly $60 and a monthly $15. We've seen quite an improvement when we do the math for the end user.
One other step that I don't see here, but I see it on a lot of paywalls, there's sort of doing the math for the user in terms of the effective monthly price point. Another thing I've seen companies try is the sort of percent savings tab. So like a little icon over the yearly plan that highlights X% off. In this case, they've used most popular, which is another good tactic, but that's something I've seen used.
Yeah. Well, we're about to see that in the next paywall. So the next paywall we're going to roast is Hinge. And another one where it's funny, I talked to my wife about this afterward. I was like, yeah, I just signed up for a dating app. It was like 10 o'clock last night, talking to my wife about Hinge. So you go through the long onboarding, and it's prepping you for, you're going to get more dates. You're creating your profile. You're getting excited about the possibility. Of course, not me as a married man, but trying to put myself in a single person's shoes 20 years ago, single me. And you get to the screen and it says subscribers go on 3 times as many dates, like a really clear value prop for the subscription. And this is the kind of multi-stage paywall that more and more apps are doing. And so subscribers go on 3 times as many dates. The call to action is check it out. Very like low friction. Of course, I want to check it out. And then it drops you into Hinge X, which is actually their higher price tier. A lot going on here that we can discuss. To your point, Phil, it actually does progressively save X, save Y, save Z, showing you the progressive savings if you commit to a longer time period. And then I wasn't going to go through the flow and like try and match with people and stuff like that. But somehow I think going into settings, I actually found this secondary paywall where it does show the lower cost Hinge Plus. So I don't know exactly where they launch people into this paywall where it does offer the lower price plan, but it is interesting that they have a higher price and a lower price plan. But at that moment of high intent, and especially after prepping you for that high intent with subscribers going 3 times as many dates, you only see that high price tier. So yeah, super interesting. Steve, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Well, I mean, I'll roast them. I think one of the things that I would probably change is the maybe later. I wouldn't make it too close to the call to action. We have seen this moving that. We had a no thanks or a free plan right next to the monthly and yearly, and we saw 2x improvement in sales by removing the free. So don't make the free as obvious, in my opinion. I know, David, we talk about this in our podcast episode where we have the little X showing up 5 seconds later, but that's what I would do for them. And we do have some data for the columns. You see the pricing plans as the columns. One of our clients did a A/B test on rows versus columns, and we saw rows convert a little bit better. Now I know the text is right below that. So that's something that they can A/B test, where maybe move the text up and move the pricing closer to that get 3 months, that call to action, and go rows instead of columns. And that way people can easily compare too.
Yeah. On the maybe later, I will say I haven't studied Hinge's business model, but that for them, it's probably that they know if you're not super high intent in the moment and you hit maybe later, that they're going to get many more opportunities to upsell you, and they probably want some amount of freemium users. So that's one of the things that you should definitely. And I mean, it goes to everything we're talking about here. It's like how aggressively you monetize has a lot to do with like your business model. So if you have a freemium plan and you want a lot of people in that freemium experience, then you maybe actually want to make the maybe later bigger and easier, or whatever. So yeah, it just depends on like in that moment, are you prioritizing monetization or not, and like what your kind of goals are there.
Yeah, good point.
Phil?
Yeah, so one thing I'll state for context with dating apps, the dating category is tough, right? Because you have inherently high churn rates. And so what that means is the best dating apps, and I actually teach a case study in my course on Tinder, have done a ton of innovation around monetization, not just in terms of subscription plans, but also in-app purchases like boosts or super likes, and Bumble's the same way. It looks like Hinge's too. So there's this inherent need in the dating category to have multiple subscription tiers and multiple subscription plans under each tier, because you've got to be able to maximize the consumer surplus you're capturing under the demand curve. But the trade-off there is it's a ton of complexity for a consumer to navigate. Like B2B subscriptions are easier in a way because you have somebody who's responsible for procuring the software, and it's a very considered purchase. So they'll look through a lot of text. The number one thing I don't love about this to roast the paywall is there's just so much text, right? If I land on this Hinge X screen, I've got these 4 different plans. 2 of them I can't even fully see on the screen. Then there's all this text underneath it. There's all this like, small text, reading the fine print, which makes me wonder, like, is there something I'm missing here? I also don't love that they're not showing Hinge Plus anywhere on this screen. If they're really, really good at targeting the right subscription plan to the right user based off of their quiz questions, then maybe this works, because I can infer that, okay, David's a Hinge X user, but Steve is a Hinge Plus user. But that's tough. Like, to not even show them the options that they have available to them is a bit risky, and also goes back to a little bit gray hat if they're trying to force people into the highest, most expensive plan without even being aware that Hinge Plus exists. So I guess
that may be what they did, though. Like, I'm on an iPhone 16 Pro. I'm a US user. Maybe in other countries they do, other devices. Like, I wonder if they do that level of personalization based on the quiz, and I just happen to only get the Hinge X.
Yeah, and if that's what they're doing, I think that's great, because it's a way of it's a way of taking the inherent complexity of multiple tiers and multiple plans and simplifying it. But I think you better really know what you're doing if you're gonna be that aggressive. And even then, Steve brought up the point, like, maybe later is maybe too obvious here. You could just use the X in the upper right corner, which is what they do on the second version of the paywall, all the way on the right. Instead of maybe later, the backup option could be check out Hinge Plus, so that you're not completely burying the fact that there's another plan here, which feels like it's a little bit too misleading to me. So those are my two biggest comments: would be simplify and get rid of all the unnecessary text, and then just make sure that you're not going too far and hiding the fact that you do have this lower price plan.
All right, let's move on to Strava. So Strava is an interesting one. Let me just step back and say that I spent like 2 hours last night going through all these flows, onboarding, paywalls, looking for where they highlight the paywall in the app. Probably the highest value 2 hours I've spent in months. And I'm kicking myself after doing this exercise. I'm not doing this more. So those of you who are here in this webinar, hopefully this hour is super high value for you, us having kind of done some of the work for you. But if you're optimizing your onboarding, paywall, other stuff, go to the freaking app store and like download a bunch of apps and look at what they're doing. You're going to get a ton of ideas. You're going to find interesting stuff. So I hadn't been through Strava's onboarding and payment flow in forever. And I went through all of the onboarding, and this first screenshot to the left is at the end of onboarding. But the onboarding really, it's very tailored, very like they know who they're serving and all that kind of stuff. So paywall is super simple. Maybe we'll roast that it's too simple. There's a lot of things that they could do differently. But then these next two screens are really cool examples of jumping off points to the paywall. So once I got into the app experience by clicking skip on the that paywall, immediately, as soon as I go to Maps, I have this call to action to start your free trial, because it's going to show routes just for me. I actually scrolled over, and because I didn't want to dox myself, like where my house is. But it was actually showing a custom route in my neighborhood. But in order to access that custom route in my neighborhood, would have had to start a free trial. And then similarly, as soon as you go to the You page, there's a very clear unlock more ways to track your progress. And so Strava and so many apps are getting really good at sprinkling these kind of calls to action across various parts of the product to get you back into that paywall. Phil, why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, so again, I'll start with what I love, and then I'll get to what I hate, or at least don't like as much. They use the Blinkist style trial explainer up front, which is great. I think this is especially important for Strava because consumers have gotten so trained at this point for a 7-day free trial, and Strava has a 30-day free trial, which is pretty unusual. And so the fact that they sort of clearly lay out, hey, here's when your trial is going to start, and then in 28 days you'll get a reminder, and then 30 days you'll be charged. That has been shown to be like a win-win-win. It increases notification opt-in rates. It increases customer satisfaction scores, and it not only increases trial start rates because people trust that they're going to have transparency on when they're going to be billed, it also actually increases trial conversion rates. You can read a lot more about this. There's been lots of literature on the Blinkist trial explainer written out there, but I love that they're doing that. I also, to emphasize what you called out, David, they're doing a really good job with what I call contextual upsells. So like picking individual premium features, and instead of, or in addition to just hammering the user with, hey, here's the paywall with the laundry list of features we offer, it's a more elegant solution of sort of when I try to use an individual premium feature, you have a customized paywall that pops up that specifically emphasizes that feature with copy that supports why that feature is so valuable. So I really like that. I guess what I don't love as much is, and without going through the full experience myself, it's a little bit hard to know exactly what this experience looked like. But my read on this is both with Unlock More Ways to Track Your Progress and Routes Just For You, I love the contextual upsells, but because they're not doing a full screen takeover or doing a better job of sort of emphasizing that upsell message, it ends up overlaid on the screen behind it, which has a ton of complexity that kind of gets in the way of the user making that decision. I mean, a specific example of that that's sort of extreme in this case is if you look at progress here, there's been like no activity for months. And so you're like upselling the user on tracking progress, even though they literally haven't used the app in 3 months. And so that's an extreme example that probably wouldn't happen much in the wild. But I guess the meta point there is once the user has expressed intent around a particular premium feature, do more to sort of like make the decision simple and get rid of all of the noise and complexity going on in the background.
What do you think, Steve?
No, I like that. So there's this other app. I like the whole reminder stuff. There's an app, Resemi. I think, David, you're going to have Will, like one of the co-founders, on the podcast soon. But they split up their onboarding, that paywall, into 3 different screens. Now, I have no data to support this, but I really like the 3 different screens because I feel like the messaging's like too much at once. Whereas they say, hey, we offer 7 days trial. So Strava can be that. Try for free. You tap that and like, we'll remind you in 2 days before it ends. Try for free. And then they hit you with their normal paywall. And I kind of like that a little bit better. I have seen that content gating, I'll call it content gating in this realm, that second screenshot work best. We had a friend of mine, he has a crossword app and he was very much stuck at a certain revenue point. And I was like, dude, you're giving too much away for free. And he started locking up a little bit more content in some of the games. And we finally got it moving again in the right direction from a revenue perspective. So I really like those. And then the last thing I'll mention is I did sign up for Strava on a weekly plan. I was in London, wanted to see all the sites and the routes that you mentioned, David. I couldn't unlock them. So I was like, all right, I'll sign up for your weekly. I canceled immediately. But I do feel like, and I know there have been talks about this, but the weekly plan is sort of, it's not a subscription. I've heard other people say it's not really a subscription. It's sort of like a one-time in-app purchase. But I'm like, they got me. Like I ended up paying because I wanted to go on that route. And I just needed it for the week I was in London and wanted to go on that run to see all the sites. So I do like that weekly plan if you're trying to get people just to try it out for a week or so. And then, I have heard from other clients that sometimes they do sign up for that cheaper plan. If they like it, they do upgrade. And I know it's a little bit, probably a small percentage of people, but I do like to have that weekly just for those one-time use cases, and no trial, by the way, on that weekly.
All right, next one we're going to look at is CapCut. And this is another one very similar to Strava. I did not see, well, not similar to Strava in this standpoint, but I did not see the paywall in onboarding at all. So CapCut's goal is to just get you in there using the product. So in order for me to even find the paywall, I filtered on that first screenshot, I filtered by pro. And so they've got all these different templates that are pro templates. And you tap on a pro template and it doesn't even show the paywall then. You actually can go fully edit. You can interact with the template. You can do everything. And then it's kind of grayed out. At the top, you see pay to export. So you have to tap pay to export. Then you get this little like bottom banner. You're using a pro template, join CapCut Pro. Then you get to the paywall. There are probably other ways to get to the paywall through CapCut, but kind of back to the whole like monetization strategy. CapCut is like getting you value. Like they want you in the app, they want you using it, they have a ton of free templates. And then there's probably like a bunch of other monetization points along the way. And then this is their paywall. Their paywall is one of the more kind of dynamic ones in this whole group. So at the top, where you see that animation and effects, that's actually like a full like looping video. And then you tap on that little T kind of button, and then it's a whole nother like animated thing going on, and then you tap on the, so it's like goes feature by feature, and you can explore them, and then when you scroll up, it's got like all these features. It's like a lot. It's a very dense paywall. So what are your thoughts on this whole strategy, Steve?
I like it. It all depends. Like, I'm not gonna say CapCut's doing really well, so I'm not gonna roast them much. But I'm kind of like, I think I understand where they're headed. And Dave, you know, I agree with you on all the points. And so if it is meant to just keep people in, download, because I do have another client in a similar realm where there is this viral component to the app, meaning they want people to use the app, share it, have the watermark there, because that drives more organic users. And this client, you know, they get about 1 million organics every month. And so I understand the strategy. I do love the fact, I know certain people are starting to move away from no trials, especially in the AI space, and kind of giving them a little bit of taste. So I'm okay with that element. And if it makes sense for your app to do something similar, I'm okay with just letting people use it, having that watermark so you get the virality out of it, and having no trial in any of your plans.
What's kind of cool about this too is that you kind of already had the trial, right? It's like you already used the template fully. Like you can fully edit the template. The only thing you can't do is export. So it kind of makes sense that they don't have a free trial, because you've already gotten to experience the value. Now you're just wanting to actually like capture that value.
Yeah, it's true.
Phil, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I'll shut up after this, but I have seen like one other case study we had where after they started using the app, you remove the trial. So the onboarding paywall had the trial, and after you started using the app, they removed the trial. A/B tested the 2 different cohorts, trial versus no trial, and saw 12,000 with the no trial cohort and about 4,000 in the trial cohort. So once they start using the app, you can just remove the trial. It'll work.
And it makes sense because then you've experienced a lot of the value and you have a better understanding of what you'd be paying for. So it makes a ton of sense to not have the trial after letting them try the app.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say on this one is I think this is such a great example of where the paywall tactics follow the overarching company strategy. And so a couple of specific points I'll make there. One, I believe CapCut's owned by ByteDance, which also owns TikTok. So like for them, maximizing every dollar of monetization from CapCut is not their goal. Their goal is getting more and more power users to be able to get maximum value out of TikTok, which includes creators and influencers. And CapCut's a tool for them. So like, yes, they want to make money off of CapCut, but that is not, it's like a drop in the bucket compared to TikTok, which is their crown jewel, which probably explains some of the decisions they've made here. The other thing I was going to say, I really like your point, Steve, around the watermark. I talk a lot in my client business around growth loops and making sure that the premium features you're putting behind the paywall are not getting in the way of your organic user acquisition growth loops. And an obvious one for a tool like this is a watermark, right? Like if you don't want the watermark, you can pay a subscription to remove it. But otherwise, you're basically providing free advertising for CapCut and for ByteDance and for TikTok by extension. And so they're more than happy to give that away for free. Really, my only criticism here, like I think they've done a great job of aligning their paywall strategy with the overarching corporate strategy of CapCut and ByteDance as a holding company. I think some of the things they're missing are like the low-hanging fruit. So like if you look at 1 year versus 1 month, they don't have the effective monthly price comparison. They don't have any % discount. They don't have the most popular. The only badge they have says 1 month, which that almost feels like that might be a bug because I don't know what that's really supposed to communicate. It says 1 month right below that. But you know, these are all, this is an example of where like, this is like $100 million plus revenue company within a behemoth that is ByteDance. And so like, it almost doesn't even matter. They're being in spite of these little errors.
Yeah.
And that's
but for those things that don't matter, I mean, at their scale, doing some of these paywall optimizations is like tens of millions of dollars.
Totally.
Yeah.
Good problem.
All right. Yeah. Next app we're going to look at is ChatGPT. And this one's especially interesting in light of iOS 18.2 recently launching. So there's 2 primary ways now to get into ChatGPT's paywall. The first one is they have Get Plus on the top. ChatGPT, another really interesting freemium example, like I tried hard last night, like literally for like 10 minutes. I sent message after message after message, even asked it like when I was going to hit the free limit, like when I was going to get rate limited. And I tried to rate limit myself and could not get myself rate limited. So they're giving away a lot of value and not trying super hard to push you. But there's this Get Plus at the top, takes you to the kind of main Get ChatGPT Plus paywall. That's the second screenshot. But then interestingly, now on iOS 18.2, when you go into set up Siri, Apple Intelligence and Siri, there's now a way to get to a paywall inside settings within Apple to extend the functionality of Siri and Apple Intelligence. And then that leads to this completely separate paywall. And I believe this paywall is using, and I should know this off the top of my head, but StoreKit has like paywalls built in now. I believe this is like actually Apple coded, like using those default StoreKit paywall, and that's why it looks so different from the other paywall, but highlights very similar information and details. So yeah, Phil, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of companies that are hard to criticize, like ChatGPT is on an app, I think it's literally the fastest growing consumer app of all time. So there's only
I was looking at App Figures data a couple of weeks ago, and according to App Figures, they have now crossed $1 billion in annual revenue run rate on the App Store. So in like 18 months, they went from 0 to, and that's that was in App Figures. You can add both iOS and Android. So looking at iOS and Android on App Figures, it showed they're over $1 billion in run rate just on the App Store. So that's not web payments or anything else. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, and there's this great graphic that about 20 different people posted in different formats. I just posted it in the chat, but it shows the fastest consumer apps to 100 million active users. And ChatGPT, I think, got there in 2 months, which is the fastest of all time. So obviously they're doing very, very well. And so similar to the feedback I gave on CapCut, I'll just sort of ground my feedback in the context of what ChatGPT is and what they're trying to accomplish, right? Because it's almost two separate games. Steve and I work with a lot of smaller companies that are seed, Series A, Series B. But even as I get into like Series C, Series D clients, the advice that I'm giving them often looks a little bit different because it's sort of like chess versus checkers, right? When you're a small stage company, you just need to make enough revenue to be able to grow your team and to be able to get the flywheel going. But at some point, you're actually willing to give away a lot more value for free because it's driving organic user acquisition or it's helping you capture market share from competitors like Anthropic in this case. And so if you look at how ChatGPT is making these decisions, I mean, one obvious example I'll give of this, and Perplexity and others are the same way. I think David just dropped off, but
I don't know, we lost him.
You saw in that first image, there was a Get ChatGPT Plus in purple against a black background on the very upper part of the screen. It's like almost impossible to read. And that's something that you would never see. I don't think you would ever see that with a smaller scale consumer app that is really trying to maximize monetization, because that's like rule number one, is make sure that they can see the upsell. But in the case of ChatGPT, it almost like these are really smart people. I'm sure they didn't do this by mistake. So I think number one, they're making it really subtle because they don't want to annoy free users into feeling like they have to pay. And two, in this case, it's so hard to read. I almost feel like they're taking it a step further. And it's like, hey, be part of the cool kids club that has access to the premium version of this product by discovering how to find the paywall. Otherwise, I just don't understand why they would make it that difficult to find. But I think, like I said, it all goes back to their overall strategy and objectives. And I think there's a method to the madness there. And then the other thing I would say is, as far as the paywall itself goes, so screens 2 and 4 here, I would actually applaud them for keeping it very simple, right? They're highlighting the name of the subscription. They've got a list of features. This is like the calm paywall, I call it. It's like very basic. Here's the list of our premium features, very short sentences, so the user doesn't have to absorb too much information. I think it's interesting that the two versions have different copy. Like if I were them, I would just have a standard set of feature descriptions that you use across all your paywalls. If for no other reason, it's just easier to maintain. But also, I think consistency builds trust with users, especially prospective subscribers. But these are relatively small nits I'm making.
Yeah, one of the things the way I think about the calm paywall, and I've talked about this before, is like how much of the heavy lifting is your paywall doing, and then that determines how much the paywall needs to do and how many screens it needs to be and everything else like that. And in ChatGPT's case, it's like people have experienced the value. They know what they're getting. The paywall's not doing a lot of heavy lifting. And so like to Phil's point, like having a simple paywall, like Calm famously for years, and a bunch of apps copied Calm doing this. But what they didn't have was, and I've said this many times, but they didn't have like LeBron James's pregame meditation. You click on that button and then you see the paywall. And so if the paywall's not having to do a lot of the heavy lifting, this kind of simple, quick, highlight the key features kind of paywall can be incredibly effective. But for a lot of apps, it's just not, because the paywall has to do heavier lifting, or maybe screens leading up to the paywall have to do heavier lifting. Steve, you were going to say something.
No, I mean, all the best practices that we would do as a small, right? Phil, like if we're working with a small AI app, we would have a weekly plan. We would have a monthly. We'd probably have a yearly. And we'd probably give a trial in some of those plans too. ChatGPT, David, you said it best. Like I'll have arguments with developers and founders, and they're like, look at the Calm paywall. They don't do that. I'm like, you're not Calm. Like you don't have to do, like you said, you don't have to do the heavy lifting. People already know the brand. People come like ready to buy. And so your paywall just needs to give them a way to pay you. And the things that I would change. So I've seen subscribe versus get started, get 30% increase. This was on the web, but we just shit. So the last screen when they say subscribe, nobody wants to subscribe. So usually put continue or get started. That tends to work better if you're a smaller app. But yeah, like you guys hit on all the other points already.
All right, we'll let you go first next time.
No, it's all good. I like following Phil.
Discord. We were going to use Reddit, but I went to download Reddit yesterday. And the reason I was going to use Reddit is that they used to have coins where you subscribe, you get coins, you use the coins to like tip commenters and stuff like that. They ditched the coin system like I guess 12 or 18 months ago, according to the web search I did. So I pivoted to Discord because Discord does actually still have a lot of this going on. So and they kind of have this like multi-stage paywall as well. So the first screen, if you scroll up, you see the second screen. So you scroll up and you see the pick your plan thing. And then when you tap on Get Nitro, then you see the yearly versus the monthly. And then again, I had to like dig around to find this because I knew it existed, that there is this whole boost thing. And so they actually have a ton of plans available. And I would assume once you've used your 2 free boosts, then they show you this where you can buy a bunch more boosts. But they've got a lot of subscription plans. But they don't, to Phil's point earlier, this is not what they show you the first time you hit the paywall. This is an option that they show you down the line. So Steve, take it away.
No, I like the first screen where Nitro, you get so much more than the basic. I like that the uploads go more too. One of the things I've always wanted to test was, because most people just have a monthly and yearly, is to give a bit more to the yearly. Basecamp, we use Basecamp internally, and they did that. Like I was on the monthly plan, like, hey, you get this many, like 3 terabytes of data if you go on the yearly. And I was like, okay, let's move to the yearly. So we moved to the yearly plan based off of the free stuff. That's one of the things I wanted to test. Like, would it be interesting for the smaller developers out there to have your basic be your monthly and then your Nitro, the normal Nitro, be your yearly?
Phil, what are your thoughts?
I don't have a lot to add. I think Steve covered a lot of the most important stuff. I guess I would relate this one back to the Hinge paywall we looked at, because to me, this is the alternative way of approaching multiple tiers and multiple plans, which is instead of just thrusting your best guess in front of the user right during onboarding, which can work if your personalization algorithm is really, really good. But this is the other option, which is we're going to present you with the various options you have, but we're going to do it in a step-by-step process that makes each individual decision as simple and easy for the user as possible. And so the first order question is, okay, are you interested in Nitro or Nitro Basic? And then you get a very simple, easy comparison between the feature set you're going to get across Basic and Nitro, with Nitro highlighted on the second screen. And then on the third screen, when you're comparing yearly versus monthly, which is the second order decision you need to make once you've selected the tier you want, then they're doing what I had also highlighted before, which is showing the percentage discount you're getting on that annual plan. So those are a few of the tricks that I like here. again, the decision on like whether to just go with your best guess at what the user wants versus show them all the options just comes down to the nature of your product and also how much you can infer about your user based on the data you have on it.
I do really like and to your point, Phil, if you're going to have multiple subscription tiers, I think this is a fantastic example of how to present that in a less complex way. So above the fold, without having to scroll, you see that Nitro gives you a lot more, and they're really colorful. And it's like, to me, this is a great information design. It's like if you have to like compare two tiers, at a glance, you see that Nitro gives you way more than Nitro Basic. And like it's super visual, it's above the fold. You can scroll and see like the detailed breakdown, but you don't have to scroll. You can just land right there in a super visual way, just see that you're going to get a lot more. And then you offload the complexity to that next step of picking the yearly versus the annual. So the yearly versus monthly. So yeah, I think there's a fantastic way to set up if you're using multi-tier to make it less complex, less cognitive load on the user. I think it's really, really great a paywall design here. Speaking of great paywall design, next up is Duolingo. So everybody probably has seen this or thought about this, or hopefully looked at it yourself. And they've been super innovative. You go through all the onboarding, and then it's really kind of a 3-step paywall. And again, we see more and more apps going through this. We're going to talk about LinkedIn next, which is a even more multi-step paywall. But yeah, you hit start my free week. Then you get the kind of Blinkist will remind you before your trial's in. You have to hit start my free week again. Then you get to picking your plan and hit start my free week for a third time. So yeah, really interesting tactics here. Phil?
Yeah, so there's a lot I love about this. I'll start with one that we covered on the last one with Discord, which is, I loved your point, David, around consumers often don't read. You would be shocked at the amount of text that you put on a mobile app screen that consumers will just never read. This is one of the first lessons I learned when I became a product manager a decade ago. And so the fact that you have this very simple visual layout of what you're getting with super versus free makes it really obvious to users how much incremental value they're getting. And the individual feature names are also very short and simple, right? It's 2 words or 3 in the case of free challenge entry. So it's very easy for the user to absorb. Another thing I love about this, and I guess I have a little bit of an unfair advantage here, having worked in ed tech for many years at Quizlet, but they start with super learners are 4.2x more likely to finish the Spanish course. At Quizlet, our equivalent language was 93% of students who use Quizlet report getting higher grades. Like, start with what matters to the user. And for a high school student, that's getting higher grades. For a language learner, that's completing their course and getting more proficient in their language of choice. So I think the fact that they're so data-driven with that 4.2x more likely is really powerful. One other thing I'll highlight here that we haven't seen as much in the other paywalls we've looked at already is Duolingo has increasingly over the last couple of years really upped its game in terms of premium feature badging and UI. So this version of Duo is called Phoenix Duo. This was also in the podcast on Lenny's newsletter a couple days ago. So there's regular Duo, which is the green owl, and then there's Phoenix Duo, which is this sort of rainbow colored, fluorescent Duo. And every time you see Phoenix Duo, you associate it with premium feature value. And so I think that's another way of just like building more excitement, more positive psych in the user's mind. And if they're a prospective subscriber, getting them over the hump to make the purchase. In terms of what I don't like, they don't use the standard Blinkist style trial explainer on the second screen. I'm assuming they tested it because Duolingo literally tests everything. So my guess is this performed better, but it's interesting that they're using an alternate variation of that. And then I guess the only other thing, and you mentioned this, David, is you have to hit start my free week 3 separate times. And so I wonder if there's a way of collapsing this a little bit more and not forcing the user to click through 3 separate buttons that essentially say the same thing.
Or at least changing the call to action. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, it's like one of those things, surely they've tested it. But this is that example of also maybe start with just copying Duolingo if you want to try these multi-stage paywalls, but it's probably not going to work for you the way it works for Duolingo. So maybe iterate from there, and maybe have some different call to actions if you're going to stretch your paywall into 3 separate screens. Steve, what are your thoughts?
No, I like it. And Phil, I'm certainly glad you went first because I love the whole Phoenix owl bit. So Yeah, I agree. Like the only other thing that I might add on this, I do like the 3-prong approach, like simple. It's kind of similar to what I talked about with Resemi, that splitting up that Blinkist into 3 different simple screens. I don't think users mind just pressing a button. The only other thing that I would add on is the family plan. This is one thing that I've been wanting to test, and I know a friend of mine has tested this. Having a family plan and a yearly, like the individual plan, works. I would try to keep the prices as close to possible, because obviously we all have families, and especially if your target audience is a little bit older, like if for slightly more, and I have this case study that was covered in the Hacking Growth book by Sean Ellis, but anyways, that's similar to what we did here. We had this just A plan and an A minus plan, and usually people will pick the A plan if you make A minus just slightly less than the A plan. So I would want to test a closer pricing than the $6.99 and $10. And I think that would work, getting more people into the family plan.
Yeah, I actually bought the family plan of Duolingo a year ago, and it was $120, man. I mean, it's education, it's kids, so like there is a kind of high intent, high willingness to pay, but it was a big thing to swallow. And then the kids didn't use it as much as I thought, and I churned, and in part because it's a lot of money if they're not going to actually use it. So the next app we're going to look at is LinkedIn. Again, another app that I have not gone through the onboarding or looked at the paywall in ages. They have like a whole paywall survey. So, you go through the onboarding, you set up your profile, you get dumped in. And I think, again, there was not a paywall in onboarding. Again, massive, social network for work. You want people on the platform, whether they're paying or not. So they kind of have a different monetization goal. But then you get here and you hit try premium for $0. Interesting text, copy text. But then it takes you to this whole survey. These next two are kind of out of order. So the first question you get is, are you interested in premium for work or personal use? And so they start like filtering you in this direction. And then once you get further along, you have these different plans. You have career, you have business, you have recruiter. If you scroll up, you get all these different plans. So you've gone through like 4 different questions to kind of pre-qualify you. And then you get dumped into the like recommended plan. And then you still tap try 1 month free and get the paywall all the way on the right that actually then like explains, is kind of a play on the Blinkist, but like with way more text. And it gives you today, within 24 hours, cancel anytime. And then that's where you select monthly or annual. So a very different approach to actually have a paywall survey once you've hit the call to action. Phil, what are your thoughts on that? It seems like your gears are grinding.
Yeah, sure. I can go first, although I think this is Steve's turn, so I'll keep it short.
No, you go, Phil.
In a lot of ways, I wish we had started with this one, because this is a very roastable paywall experience. Now, I will say, and a couple folks in the chat have made comments around like, hey, isn't the core value really the most important part of this? And the paywall is really just the cherry on top. That's true to a degree. I mean, that's value creation and value capture, but they need to work hand in hand. So I will say that LinkedIn borders on a prosumer subscription use case versus consumer, which means you can get away with a little bit more text. You can get away with a few more steps because it's generally going to be a more considered purchase. It's probably also a slightly more affluent user demographic than a lot of consumer apps.
They're expensing it. It's not coming out of your...
In some cases.
Yeah.
But even having said all that, I mean, there's so much text here. Even stuff as simple as like the visual UI. I'm not a designer, but there are so many different colors, right? There's green for the progress bar and the recommended, but then there's blue for the CTA, unless it's try premium for $0, where it's orange. There's just so many different icons and color schemes being used. There's a ton of text, which a lot of people aren't going to read through. And so like, to me, rule number 1 for a paywall, especially for consumer, but even for a prosumer subscription, is make the purchase decision as simple and easy as possible. And I just don't think they're doing an effective job of that here. I think they're actually making it more complicated. So I'll stop there and let Steve jump in.
No, I completely agree. I've never, like, every time I try to sign up for premium on the web, mind you, but I never know which one to sign up for because none of them really make sense to me. And I'm like, I don't know. So I think I agree with all of this. there's not much to add other than they need to get clear. Like Phil, I agree with everything you said, and it's just I would probably want to get a sense of like what they're here for, and then just give me a simple plan and just be like, here, this is the plan that fits for you. Kind of like BetterHelp, where you go through this long onboarding, be like, okay, here's your plan, we've got you, and fitness apps do that, and I would probably want to see more of that on LinkedIn versus what they're trying to do with this. Like, and I never know what to pick, business, career. I'm like, I don't know what to pick here.
All right, we've got two content apps up next. So we're going to do Paramount Plus and Crunchyroll, so we can kind of speed run these. But I do find this really interesting. So Paramount Plus, I think it's the first hard paywall we've experienced in all of the 10 top apps that we've looked at. And it makes sense. It's a content app. Netflix, others, like they've shied away from offering free trials in more recent years. I'm sorry, they do have try for free, but it's like you can't do anything without starting that trial. And then Crunchyroll does actually have freemium, and we'll talk about that next. But yeah, it's really simple. Like, you open the app, there's actually not any onboarding, and it just shows you what you're going to get. You can scroll through like all their kind of top shows or whatever, and then it's try it for free or sign in. And then once you sign in, it's the same thing. You got to like start a free trial to use the app. And then the paywall is like super simple. So Steve, we'll let you start first on this one since you went last.
Well, one of the things I borrowed from Peacock was so we have a Peacock subscription as well, and it was just like a slightly more for Paramount Plus with like no ads. So they almost had 3 plans. They had the Showtime, and they had Essential, and then Paramount Plus with like Essential, and they had like a more premium plan. It was $1 more and I think I signed up for the $1 more for the no ads. So I would play around with that, but I think with these type of big companies, I don't have too much more to add. I think just having the shows, some of the more popular shows at the top, might be more interesting to get people engaged. Like, oh yeah, I did sign up because I wanted to watch this show. And David, to your point with CapCut, we did see for another case study that sometimes video on the paywall converts better than definitely a photo converts better than like an illustration. So a photo of real people, and then video converted better for others. So that's the thing that I might play around with this paywall for.
Phil?
Yeah, I think you nailed the biggest point, which is if you look at this very first screen, you want to separate the build-up where you're building positive psych for the user and getting them excited to subscribe from the purchase moment where you're actually getting them to convert. And what I really don't like about this first screen is you've got the image in the background and a mountain of entertainment, and it looks like you can scroll through and see other titles. But then you've got this subtext that's like revealing the price prematurely in my mind. Like, focus on getting the user excited first, and then once they click through, then you can show them the prices. That'd be my number one piece.
And real quick, I pulled up the paywall where we were talking, and to Steve's point, this is a video app, and it's all just photos. It's all just images. So there's no animation, there's no video. It's just static images that you scroll through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That feels like a miss. And then the only other thing I would say, and this may be because this is the media and entertainment category, and I've built this subscription value calculator with RevenueCat that looks at all these metrics by category. In media and entertainment, you tend to see more monthly subscriptions because people are subscribing for a period of time while they watch a show they really like, and then they'll unsubscribe. But generally, best practice is default the user to viewing the annual plan, not the monthly plan, because it's generally higher LTVs and better cash flow dynamics. It looks like they do the opposite. But again, that's with the caveat that in their category, that may make sense.
And with that price point as well.
Sorry, one more thing, David. We did work with like a streaming app, and it was the library, but we have seen that sometimes just allowing them not a hard paywall, but allowing them to see the content. Obviously you can't watch anything, but I think just like the top trending shows like Netflix does really well. Now every freaking streaming app has a top trending or the top shows in the US or wherever country you might be in. But I think just showing the breadth of content would help. And obviously the content is gated, but they might want to try that too.
Yeah, and then speaking of which, and this is why I put Crunchyroll on here to kind of as a counterpoint to Paramount, is that it's very similar first screen, and I think we can all agree that's probably a little under optimized. No onboarding, it's just an image, and then you have explore free trial, which is like I guess like they're a massive app. I mean, again, Paramount and Crunchyroll, they're making a ton of money, so maybe this doesn't matter as much for them. But there's like not a lot going on there. But if you tap on explore free trial, you do get this paywall with 3 different plans that you can swipe between. But then what's interesting is you can hit that X, and if you look all the way to the right, it allows you to watch the first 3 episodes of any series. And I didn't go through enough series to know if that's like a hard and fast rule, if it's 1 in some, 2 in others. But it lets you watch it in English for free for those first 3. And then even the premium ones, you can watch them in Japanese for free, but you have to pay for premium. And so this was kind of, to Steve's point, is that for a content app, getting somebody hooked on a show by letting them watch the first 3 episodes and then the rest of the content is locked can be a really powerful strategy to like give people that value. And so instead of a free trial, and they do offer a free trial here, but maybe instead of a free trial or in addition to the free trial, it's like you're getting them hooked on a show, getting them to experience the value, and then they have to upgrade to continue that path and watch the rest of the season. What are y'all's thoughts? We're at the top of the hour, so we can do this one quick.
Go ahead, Phil. Take it away.
Yeah, I can give my quick take. I mean, this is sort of the inverse of the last one, where they really lead with their content, right? So right on that landing screen, you're seeing, half a dozen different covers of content, which is ultimately what you're here to pay for. It looks like they only offer monthly plans. I've never used Crunchyroll, and I'm assuming those 3 that you're scrolling through on the second screen are tiers, not.
Yeah, they're all tiers.
So that's also an interesting decision that, again, in the media and entertainment category might make a lot of sense, because if the vast majority of your users are going to buy monthly anyways, then you simplify the purchase decision for them. And then one other subtle thing I'll call out, it doesn't look like that yellow button is on brand for them. Like Crunchyroll's colors are orange. I don't know if they use that yellow anywhere else. Having said that, they're doing 2 things really effectively. One is they use premium feature badging. So every time you see this crown icon in the yellow, that's associated with premium. And then the second thing is there's actually been some research that shows that because so many people are subscribed to Amazon Prime now, if you convert your CTA button for a premium subscription purchase to the Amazon yellow color, it can actually, in some cases, increase conversion. And I don't know if they're exactly the same, but like looking at that color, it looks very similar to Amazon Gold to me.
Interesting. Steve, any wrap up thoughts on this?
Yeah, the last bit would be, what I've heard from others. To a client of ours, he was like, look, if you have premium content, even though if you're subscribed, make sure people still know that it's premium content. And so if Crunchyroll has free and premium, even if I'm subscribed, know that, hey, this is unlocked for me, but it's still premium content, just as a reminder to get them to not subscribe. And I know Phil alluded to this earlier, but Amos, who said, I think I said his name right, but he was like, look, you have to show value. I think that goes without saying, almost, no offense to you, but I'm like, obviously, if we were talking about paywalls, what I consider, when people download your app, it's a considered purchase, right? Like, not a lot of people, they're looking at the ratings, they're looking at your screenshots, and they're coming in as a warm lead. It's your opportunity to just sell them with this paywall. If they don't stay on and your trial to paid goes down, that's where the value comes in, or your subscription retention, that's where value comes in. So I think all of us, I speak for all 3 of us, we assume that you're adding value and you're not just trying to scam people and we're roasting paywalls, but paywall is your first opportunity, because most people do buy during that first time user experience. It is that first opportunity to not only, they probably understand some value that you have with the app. That's why they download it. So it's your opportunity to try to win them over. And then the value you add is to keep them in your app as well.
Yeah, that's a great thought to wrap up on. We've got Phil's LinkedIn. They're actually pretty easy to find. LinkedIn, Steve and Phil, Appmasters, and philgcarter.com. Anything the 2 of you wanted to say as we're wrapping up?
No, thanks for having us, David.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, so much fun. Thank you both for taking the time. I think it was super insightful. We've gotten a lot of messages here at the end saying it was super helpful. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and thank you all for joining us today. And then let us know. I think I did see in the chat somebody was saying we should do some like vertical specific, like do 10 different dating app paywalls and do 10 different utility app paywalls. So that could be a really fun kind of roast we could do later in 2025. But yeah, thanks for joining, and thank you, Phil and Steve.
Thanks
Bye,
for having
everyone.
us. This was fun.